to the Unveiled Epic Echoes channel. These days, we're diving deep into an unexplored historical thriller within the waning light of a vintage dual carriageway that hunched through the flat plains of West Texas. There sat a lodge that maximum travelers observed as an offer, a stretch of neon and stucco in which the road took a sluggish breath. And allow the nighttime in, it became the kind of location whose sign had once promised smooth beds and warm espresso, and now presented only a flicker of history and the affected person hush of a forgotten course. They known as it the Meridian Lodge, a call left over from a time while the dual carriageway marked something extra than a line on a map. Some of the rooms, with their mismatch of curtains and small oil lamps, and the faint odor of lodge cleaning soap that stuck to the curtains like reminiscence. Room 17 held a weird recognition, whispered by truckers and librarians alike. Each reflect in that room showed an exceptional you, and each reflected self moved a second late. The story starts with a history professor on sabbatical who drove there to discover a quiet vicinity to study the thin, brittle journals she had inherited from her grandfather. A man who had spent his lifestyles tracing small, shadowed events in American history, raids and rescues, damaged treaties, and the hidden edges in which cultures met, and on occasion folded into each other, desired solitude and regular coffee, and perhaps a nook wherein the overdue afternoon mild might set her pages aglow. She determined something else totally. The hotel clerk, a gentle-spoken female named June, with years layered like sediment below her eyes, slid the important thing with a crooked smile and said, "Room 17 loves to keep its tailies," laughed, contemplating the many small superstitions that orbit vintage places. She become a student of not noted truths, but she did not agree within ghosts. The room, however, had a sluggish, deliberate manner of disproving certainties. It turned into decorated immodesty, burnished timber, a small patterned bedspread, 2 antique dressers, and on every wall, in frames that ranged from ornate gilt to simple wooden, hung mirrors. Some had been circular, like coins smoothed through tide. Others have been tall as doors. They had been placed with an atypical consideration, in order that while you moved through the space, you encountered your mirrored image, not as soon as, however, generally, as if a couple of windows had opened onto some single, fractured self. Noticed in the beginning, most effective the smooth discrepancy. The woman inside the replicate would blink a fragment after she did, or her palms could lift a hair a breath later. At night time, when the colors pooled and settled, the impact deepened. Each mirrored self carried out a small postpone, a 2D that that stretched like a chunk of distant song. At the start, it felt like a trick of the eyes, a fatigue-caused lag. But as the hours grew lengthy, and the beyond inside the notebooks became greater insistent, the lag began to talk. The journals spoke, frequently in marginalia and maps annotated in slanted pen, of a phenomenon tied to an antique station wagon and an archaeological dig that in no way went public, a team that disappeared and left behind simplest a cache of clay figurines and a subject pocketbook with a final line 1-2 scratched out, who had spent years teaching about the quiet revolutions buried in dirt, felt the scholarly itch. An unexplored history lay in those pages, and the lodge had folded itself around it like the pages of a book. Outdoor, the desolate tract changed into a long, soft silence. However, interior room 17. The mirrors began to inform their personal version of the narrative. While reached for a tumbler of water, her mirrored self did too, behind schedule like ripples, whilst she studied a paragraph aloud. The voice came lower back from the mirror a 2D later, an echo with the inflection slightly altered, as though some older accessory had edged its manner into the sound. She located herself taking note of those seconds, gathering them, and in doing so, she felt time loosen around the rims. In the behind schedule movement of her reflections, histories arrived, no longer as blunt information, but as impressions and scenes that slid in like ghosts of the literal beyond. The biggest reflect, the one over the dresser with its smoky surface, presented an imaginative and prescient of a discipline, a unique panorama superimposed on the resort's beige wall. Low stone walls in a hoop, children running between them, the heady scent of wet earth. Inside the replicate, a young lady knelt to press a shell-fashioned stone into the floor. Breath slowed. The scene did now not repeat the hotel's gift so much as overlay itself, a window into every other now. Every reflect held such home windows. Spanish friars placing down small crosses and negotiating food shipments with people whose names had been effaced from ledgers. A caravan of women and men 3 generations removed from the coast, buying and selling woven blankets for iron nails. A civilian conservation corps crew laying cobblestones where as soon as elder trees had stood. A satellite picture, grainy and half of toned, displaying traces within the earth that matched the petroglyphs in the journals. The delay, she found out, was no longer an insignificant disorder of optics, however a cadence, a rhythm that allowed the present to breathe, with the past a beat at the back of. As her attention sharpened, commenced to feel a pattern threaded through the journal entries, an arc of continuity that related those disparate activities, an unrecorded migration route that skirted the regarded maps. A chain of conferences among peoples who left no legitimate facts, however, had exchanged songs, gear, and a cautious consider in which academics had written footnotes. The motel's mirrors provided scenes wherein history books had a blank area. The not-on-time reflections filled it with dwelling snapshots. Inside the quiet between the mirrored echoes, study of a hidden congress, an historical percent, now not written in vellum, however remembered in gadgets, and in oral fragments whispering through generations. The seed had been born of necessity in a time whilst climate shifted and plants failed, and those who had never met found out to share wells and heal collectively. The artifacts determined with the aid of her grandfather's group, the once clay figurines, those fragments of woven fabric were not mere curiosities, however keys. They match into a larger narrative that instructed of a network of refuge along the plains, a chain of small, hospitable places wherein the vulnerable could locate relaxation. The Meridian Lodge, she started out to suspect, sat on one such node. On the second night, the delayed reflections spoke extra genuinely, as unrolled a crumpled web page and traced the looped handwriting of an vintage Call Elias. One replicate showed a man in a hat, stooped and kind, arguing softly with a lady in a red shawl. Their fingers moved in accord, and a vintage child laughed and pointed on the sky. The replicate's second past do echo replayed their conversation, as though it had been a beat at the back of, in that beat, a word lingered. We skip it on like light. The journals hinted at an concept that certain places should conserve human reminiscence, that human stories should gather in the bones of homes, and inside the reflective surfaces we preserve in our rooms. In room 17, the mirrors stored now not arrogance but continuity, and every not-on-time movement was a garage and a launch, who had constantly believed that history became made from human gestures, felt without delay the intimacy of those behind schedule gestures, and the obligation to concentrate. The inn's quiet became a type of archive. Nights lengthened, and the mirrors deepened their offerings. In one, a man unscrewed a plinth and determined under it a hollowness packed with seed, a small percent written on paper so old the ink had blurred into the fiber. In another, a pair of vacationers sat beneath a folding table and exchanged tailies by way of lamplight, trading names and map marks like forex. The extra she watched, the extra saw the common thread, an unrecorded gadget of care that persisted through centuries. Those who, whilst disaster and drought and conquest swept the plains, opened their doors to strangers and shared their bread. It became a subterranean humanity inside the margins of official narratives. A tenderness the textbooks had no longer deemed considerable sufficient to word. As she turned pages and watched echoes, she started out to sense some other presence inside the room. June had left a small tin of dusty postcards within the wardrobe, and a notice that study, in a hand each practical and affectionate. If you pay attention whilst the mirrors pause, you might hear them tell you what to take. Did now not totally consider superstition. However, she became a scholar of styles, and the observe appeared aligned with the hotel's layout. She started to deal with the behind schedule selves as narrators, leaning into the second one for glimpses. She would nation a date aloud, April 2, 1933, and the replicate would tremble and display a scene. A line of harvesters in, a girl handing out small wrapped loaves. She would say an Arialano river crossing, and the mirrored image would solution with a baby's drawing of a ship, and a "Be aware" scrawled on the margin of a ledger. Each 2D found out an artifact of memory, and every artifact hinted at a human face. Over the subsequent days, his cautious studying and the room's sluggish revelations braided into one inquiry. The greater she seemed, the more the hotel's mirrors regarded to pick certain tailies, the ones wherein humans had chosen to do not forget every other in spite of legit erasure. They showed a clandestine school that taught songs in both Spanish and a dialect without a legit script. They confirmed the cautious burial of a field of gear and a pocket book below a stone with a symbol that matched a mark on a clay figurine. Most compellingly, they showed a council below a stand of cottonwoods where various elders inscribed a seed to hold a network of secure rooms, locations, just like the meridian for the ones displaced by storms and famines. This council, the mirrors recommended, were contemporaneous with, and perhaps an answer to, a greater famous historic upheaval. A flood of commercial growth that flattened small communities, wherein the legit record applauded progress. The replica records recorded a protection, a aware attempt to maintain the threads of human reminiscence intact. Observed herself much less, and much less in the gift, and more a passenger in these layered scenes. And yet, as opposed to evaporating her experience of self, the enjoy made her sense rooted in a lineage she had no longer regarded she belonged to. She started to jot down what the mirrors revealed, and in doing so, she became a scribe in an historical mode, someone who took dwelling memory and set it down in ink. Her notes in flip fed the mirrors, which regarded to reply to being witnessed. They widened their aperture, imparting longer sequences, small unfolding over hours in preference to seconds. One prolonged vision revealed a lady named Lydia, who were each midwife and organizer, moving from house to residence to sow fevers and train songs that disguised maps. She taught people to bear in mind safe crossings as lullabies, to train them now not to mention addresses, however, to hum directions. Inside the mirror, the lullabies had been visual. A river's bend looked like a sample within the quilts she taught to sew. The lodge mirrors preserved that technique rhythms that had been sung and sewn, wrote furiously, sometimes best pausing to let the behind schedule reflections line up along with her very own palms. The resort had turned out to be a schoolroom of the beyond, but one with a moral geometry. The memories, usually folded, returned to a desire. Every revealed scene emphasized hospitality, the choice to skip on knowledge, to go away clear markers for the next tourists. The thriller thickened whilst she found, tucked in a pocket of an antique photo in the journals, a map fragment with an X marked wherein the Meridian Hotel now stood. The handwriting matched her grandfather's notes, and beyond that, the image on a clay figurine, a easy spiral underlined by using a immediately line. While she held the map to the most important reflect, the mirrored Lydia appeared up and mouthed a name, a syllable that couldn't at the start parse, as it came 1 second after it had surpassed her lips. She repeated it aloud, and the reflect repeated it returned, and the syllable resolved. It was not a person's name, however a phrase that supposed. In the dialect the journals had rendered, preserving location. The lodge, the journals, the delicate artifacts painted an image, now not of spectacle, however, of stewardship. The second passed, due reflections, taught a lesson about temporality. That history is not merely in the back of us, nor thoroughly in advance, however regularly lingers beside us. Always a beat out of sync, however, although alive. With that realization came a responsibility. The resort did no longer want to be filmed or monetized. It wanted to be tended. The delayed selves realized had enterprise. They were caretakers of reminiscence. When she left the room for a moment to go back a name to June about refilling the espresso, she observed that the mirrors had shifted slightly, the patterns rearranged in order that the not-on-time versions emphasized one-of-a-kind scenes. June defined on the phone, in a voice threaded with know-how and discretion, that room 17 were a sanctuary in lots of little histories, and that those who had stayed there frequently carried a sort of ballast of recollections. "It's not all ghosts," she said quietly. "On occasion, it is simply how humans hold each other. Mirrors are funny. They take into account how you move." Laughed and instructed June she understood. no longer pretty aware of how deep the comprehension ran. The longer she stayed, the greater intimate the mirrors have become. They discovered a betrayal and a reconciliation, a small battle over water rights, and the eventual stitching of broken agreements into new covenants. The lodge's past become no longer static. It had argued and disagreed, after which created new paths. The climax of this nocturnal history arrived abruptly. One reflected reflection, longer than regular and uncharacteristically urgent, showed a celebration of human beings carrying a crate towards a property, and burying the crate underneath a stone encircled by means of 3 smaller rocks. They whispered of an approaching cataclysm, storms that would wash out bridges and burn fields. The magazine's marginalia contained a moved quickly note in her grandfather's hand. They hid greater than seed. His fingers trembled as she traced the dwindled loops. The mirror then confirmed the crate being opened decades later through an infant who determined now not most effective implements, however uncertain, in oilcloth. The e-book contained instructions written in a hybrid script for making shelter and for retaining seeds, for signaling with quilts, for coaching the next era how to read the land in case reputable facts were misplaced. The had traveled and been and hidden again. The inn's mirrors, in a powerful, slow movement montage, revealed how the e-book becomes surpassed through hands. A midwife, a visiting teacher, a service provider who crossed county lines, a preacher who desired to educate inside the margins. Every recipient brought a word inside the front, a small correction, a tune. The climax crescendoed with the picture of a caravan crossing a highway underneath blackened skis, and the belief that the inn itself had been one of the chain's remaining scene markers felt as even though she watched a heartbeat. The behind schedule reflections did no longer stop with history. They connected to an immoral present as she read the e-book's sewn pages, pages that the mirrors had, in their second-late ways, allowed her to glimpse, understood that what were hidden turned into survival know-how, dispensed and stored outside authentic records, exactly because reliable records had frequently betrayed those they had been meant to shield. The hotel and its mirrors had been one cache among many, a human-led archive designed for redundancy and for the warm temperature of shared reminiscence. She understood then why the reflections moved a second past due. The delay became a safeguard. It prevented immediate capture. It allowed activities to be witnessed and then located forward a beat later, so the story holder could choose how and whilst to show. The second's area made room for discretion, whose lifestyles were full of footnoted lives and marginal heroes, felt a surge of duty. She had come in search of solitude to finish reading. She understood now that solitude was a luxurious, that history once in a while commandeered. She commenced to transcribe the portions she ought to, copying songs, sketching duvet patterns that doubled as maps, writing down lists of medicinal herbs with their local names and recipes. On every occasion she wrote, the mirrors leaned in, their delayed photographs lengthening into sequences as though to mention, yes, report this. When she organized to go away, the motel seemed reluctant to offer her lower back to the toll road. June surpassed her, a small, undeniable envelope that contained an unmarried rectangular tile of unglazed clay, stamped with the spiral underlined by way, a V-line image. It helps to take into account, June said softly, who had stored the journals and the e-book from the mirrors, tucked the tile into her bag, and felt a quiet accord in her chest. At the force lower back, the motorway unfolded like a ribbon, and the hotel shrank into the like a memory itself. Notion of how records frequently asks to be listened to, how people construct their protection nets in the shadows when the mild of reliable popularity fails them. And she felt a reaffirmed notion inside the human capacity for custody of land, of every other, of reminiscence. Inside the months after her stay, she posted a careful, respectful examine about informal networks of safety and memory in the plains, mindful to keep away from sensationalizing the inn's mirrors and to shield what had to be protected. The human practices, the songs, the quilt saz maps. She worked with neighborhood groups, elders, and librarians to digitally archive what human beings consented to share, constantly honoring requests for anonymity. The Meridian Motel, she wrote, was less a supernatural spectacle and extra an artifact of the way humans select to safeguard each other across time. Those who had as soon as used the inn as a node of refuge persisted to name it in their very own languages and lullabies, retaining area. Years later, whilst again for a brief go-to, the resort seemed the same in its careful plainness. Room 17's mirrors still coated the partitions, and the put-off lingered like an antique rhythm, patient and type. She stood before the largest mirror, and for a full minute watched herself blink and pass, and then watched the echo capture up, a 2D late, like a partner taking its time to honor the scene. In that second, she felt the burden and the grace of all folks that had selected to preserve each other's histories. And she smiled with the quietness of someone who had found out to pay attention. The hotel had now not requested for repute. It had asked for witnesses, and in witnessing, had helped it do what it continually had bypass on information inside the way humans had continually finished when professional statistics have been insufficient. Via music, through quilting, via delayed mirrors that gave memory a breath to breathe earlier than it kept going. In case you ever find yourself driving on an antique highway and notice a signal that has discovered to flicker like a considerate neighbor, you might determine to stop. If you are lucky, and if you are gentle and curious in identical degree, a room with many mirrors might also open its small archive to you, and you will study in the patient second among your movement, and its echo, now not just who you are, however, who has saved you corporation across the centuries, the teachers, the folks that taught songs as maps and tucked survival books under stones, so that a person someday would locate them and make new prayers out of them. The reality isn't continually a unmarried, shining proclamation. On occasion, it is a constellation stitched quietly into the margins. And every so often, it is an in-room in which each replicate shows a unique you that moves a second past due, giving beyond and gift a threat to breathe together. This mysterious adventure ends right here, but live tuned for greater untold tales in our next video. Join the channel and hit the bell icon so you do not omit any new testimonies. And yet, as stepped quietly out of room 17 and let the door slip shut at the back of her, something diffused shifted in the air around the antique motel, as though the constructing itself exhaled after holding its breath for decades. The hallway lighting fixtures flickered, no longer in caution, however in reputation, and paused long enough to be aware that the mirrors hooked up alongside the slender hall have been not delaying her reflection in any respect. As a substitute, they moved in perfect sync, as although they have been acknowledging that she had eventually learned the way to convey the testimonies they'd proven her. Outside, the sky turned into an extensive Texas blue, rinsed easy with the aid of the early warmness of noon. She walked slowly towards her vehicle, conscious of every footstep, of the way special the world felt now that she knew the hidden patterns stitched under it. The clay tile in her pocket warmed towards her skin, as although maintaining its very own pulse, and she questioned whether it had been expecting her long before she knew to search for it. She was midway to her vehicle while she observed June's status on the walkway beside room 11, leaning towards the railing with a thoughtful stillness, the sort that advised she were looking, now not out of curiosity, but out of quiet responsibility, lifted a hand in greeting. But June, most effective, squinted barely, then called throughout the gap. Her voice carried through the soft hiss of the wind. "You saw greater than the standard, didn't you?" Didn't solution right away. The mirrors had proven her histories that were by no means supposed for textbooks. Maps that existed most effective in quilts and lullabies. Networks of shelter woven without permission. Those have been now not memories to be summarized casually. So, as an alternative, sincerely walked closer to June until the two stood below the shadow of a rusted metal awning, the sun bleaching the parking lot in the front of them. I noticed what needed to be remembered, stated sooner or later. June nodded, emotion both approving and unbearably sad. Room 17 doesn't open itself like that until it thinks you can carry what it offers. Taken into consideration that, does the room ever get tired? June's gaze drifted toward the antique door. Its turquoise paint, sun-cracked into small islands. Reminiscence is heavy, she stated softly, but it's what continues us going. The room simply makes positive the right humans take the right pieces with them. It's constantly done that, long before the hotel changed into constructed, long earlier than my own family even settled here. A dust-encumbered breeze curled among them, carrying the faint, heady scent of sagebrush and asphalt. Felt the clay tile warm again, as though responding to June's phrases. Your family has been right here a long term then, stated. June's eyes softened. Longer than the buildings. My grandmother used to mention this area chooses its keepers. She said the land recalls the ones who don't appearance far away from the difficult truths. She studied face, and people like you, those who concentrate deeply, it remembers you too. The statement settled into with a surprising weight. She felt a sudden, unexplainable sense that the motel wasn't finished together with her, not in a haunting way, but within the manner a teacher isn't finished with a pupil who nevertheless has extra to analyze. What takes place to the mirrors, while nobody is the usage of them? Asked. June smiled, an expression that appeared to keep generations. They watch, they wait, they gather the pieces that fall among the years. They save what humans forget about, or what humans have been afraid to store inside the open. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, and now and again, they maintain futures too. However, that depends on who's looking. His coronary heart gave a small, startled thump. Futures. The mirrors had shown her forgotten histories, hidden alliances, quiet acts of courage. However, she had now not considered the opportunity of what lay in advance. Before she ought to ask, June tilted her head, as although paying attention to something couldn't listen. Then she stepped closer and tapped the pocket where the clay tile rested. Have you ever checked out the again of it, but? Blinked. No. June nodded. Do it someplace quiet, and now not in in front of mirrors you don't consider. A faint smile flickered throughout her lips, then dwindled into calm seriousness. The tile is not only a reminder, it's a key, and keys don't open best doorways. A tremor of curiosity threaded Via's veins, but she compelled herself to remain steady. What does it unlock? June began strolling away, her footsteps making gentle, whole sounds towards the timber walkway. She didn't appearance again when she replied, "Something you're no longer geared up to look, but..." The wind picked up at that moment, stirring dirt throughout the car parking zone and sending the resort's old signal creaking lightly, as even though echoing June's cryptic caution, stood in area, watching the shadows shift along the walkway, then slowly reached into her pocket and lifted the tile into the sunlight. The front bore the spiral symbol she already knew, but when she became it over, she felt her breath hitch. The returned turned into etched with a pattern she diagnosed immediately, even though she had never visible it outside desires. An arrangement of traces, intersections, and curves that seemed like a map, but not of any bodily land she knew. It resembled the reflect visions, round, expanding, layered like time itself, but on the center of the sample turned into something else, something that made her pores and skin prickle, a small shape, nearly invisible unless tilted towards the sun, caught the mild. It became an image she had seen best once earlier, then buried deep in her grandfather's notes. Next to a sentence he had crossed out so heavily the paper had torn. If the spiral is ever finished, the mirrors will prevent delaying. Stared on the tile, her heartbeat pulsing in her fingertips. She grew to become the tile once more, slowly, as though the motion would possibly shift that means. The image at the middle glimmered faintly, like a trapped moment of time waiting to be launched. She closed her hand around it. Her smartphone buzzed once, sharply pulling her lower back. She glanced on the caller ID. It wasn't more than a few she identified. It wasn't even an area code close to Texas. However, the call that appeared froze her in place. Elias, the name from the journals, a man who had died many years earlier than she changed into Born, a person she had seen best within the mirror visions. The telephone buzzed once more, and the mirrors inside room 17 in the back of her shuddered in ideal unison, as if the second past due delay had simply stuck up. The smartphone buzzed a third time, the vibration trembling through his hand like a pulse from another century. She stared at the glowing call Elias, unable to breathe for a second, caught between disbelief and the eerie reality that not anything about this location had ever been unintended. Slowly, almost towards her own will, she swiped to reply. A soft crackle crammed the road, like old radio static, and then a voice, consistent, heat, elderly by way of each expertise, and dirt, spoke her name with a familiarity that lifted every hair on her fingers. You observed the tile. She iced up. The voice wasn't ghostly. It wasn't distorted. It sounded alive, human, like a person speaking throughout a long-distance line within the middle of a barren region nighttime. And yet, Elias were useless for decades. How are you? She began. However, the voice lightly interrupted. Don't waste time on the incorrect query. Ask the one you already convey. Swallowed, feeling the weight of the tile in her palm. Why did you depart this? What does the sample imply? An extended breath whispered throughout the connection. Like wind through cottonwoods, the mirrors confirmed you the past. You know that plenty. A pause, but they simplest put off what belongs to memory. The spiral tells any other tale. Turned the tile in her hand once more. The middle image glinted beneath a thin layer of dust she hadn't, but brushed away. What story? She whispered. The one we never dared write, Elias stated. Because once it's understood, it is able to begin. A chilly ripple traced his backbone. Begin what? The convergence. The word sat heavy, historical, like something spoken only in fireside circles. Tightened her grip on the telephone. Elias persisted. Voice consistent, however, threaded with urgency. You watched of time as a line, but the land thinks of it as a circle. A circle can flip, and the mirrors, they're the hinge. Always were. They mirror the echoes of what turned into. However, if the spiral completes, they will start to mirror what's going to be. No put off, no hesitation. The reminiscence of June's caution pulsed in thoughts. Something you're no longer geared up to look, but breath caught. Are you pronouncing the mirrors ought to show the destiny? No, Elias stated softly. I'm pronouncing they already have. You simply haven't understood which reflections weren't yours. The sector around regarded to tilt. Room 17 wasn't constructed on a twist of fate. Elias persevered. It changed into constructed on a crossing, a place in which memory, land, and those kept every other alive, while the arena forgot them. The mirrors were located there for a motive. They were a promise we made to guard what the future might require. His heartbeat grew louder. Shield from what? However, Elias didn't answer. No longer immediately. A burst of static cracked via the line, like a hurricane sweeping among them. Whilst his voice back, it turned into thinner, strained. They've shifted since you arrived. That means you're carrying something the mirrors understand, something they've been expecting. The spiral won't hold without you. Why me? She demanded. Because, he said softly, you're the primary one in 3 generations who listened without asking the mirrors to show themselves. You dealt with reminiscence as obligation, no longer spectacle. They trust you. I felt her throat tighten. What takes place if the spiral completes? A silence, deep and ancient, filled the road. When Elias subsequently spoke, his voice carried a sorrow so gentle it felt like dusk settling on a vintage grave. Then all of the hidden memories, all of the blanketed futures will meet. The saved paths will align. The safe places will wake. He breathed slowly, and some will need to prevent that. A relax rippled through. Who? But earlier than Elias could answer, an unexpected steel groan echoed in the back of her, a sound like a door dragging across the floor. She spun round. Room 17's door becomes starting, very slowly, very deliberately, with no one touching it. Her mirrored image appeared inside the nearest hallway mirror. However, it did now not move when she became. It just stared lower back at her, eyes darker than her own, expression somber, as though preparing her for something she couldn't but understand. On the phone, Elias inhaled sharply. Listen carefully. Do no longer. The road cut. Useless silence. Then, for the primary time in view that she'd arrived, the mirrors in the hallway moved 2D early, as even though waiting for her next breath. The door to room 17 creaked wider, and a low hum, like a tuning frequency, aligning with her heartbeat, rose from inside. Stepped backward instinctively. The reflection in the reflect improved. Toward her, not a second late, not behind schedule at all. Perfectly synchronized, till the very last moment, while its lips moved earlier than hers, forming a single word she felt in place of heard. Begin. The word start rippled through like a struck bell, quiet but resonant, sinking via marrow, vibrating in places no normal sound could reach. Her pondered self stood poised in the hallway replicate, its eyes fixed on her with a depth that felt older than her bones. And for a suspended moment, the whole lodge seemed to attend, holding its breath inside the skinny seam among realities. Room 17's door eased open every other inch, not slamming, no longer dragging, just inviting, like an antique pal returning with expertise that might smash or keep her. His pulse thudded at the bottom of her throat. She took one small, careful step towards the room. The mirrored image did the equal, till midway through the motion, it faltered, caught in a moment of divergence. His foot settled at the timber walkway, but her mirrored image stopped mid-stride, its gaze moving past her shoulder to to a few unseen presents in the back of her. A warning, a message, a shift. She felt the air strain change, a diffused contraction, like the room inhaled her presence. The clay tile in her hand warmed sharply, almost burning, and she looked down at it instinctively. The spiral was nevertheless any more. The central image, as soon as softly etched, now glowed faintly, lines brightening like threads warming beneath a flame. The tile pulsed as soon as, then twice, gradual, rhythmic, as although syncing with the pulse of something beneath the motel. The reflection spoke again, lips moving earlier than "Don't flip around." Her breath hitched. She hadn't sensed each person at the back of her. However, the fact in the reflected voice became absolute. So she kept her eyes ahead, at the open door, on the mirrors leaning inward, on the sharp, ready quiet. A faint whisper rustled near her ear. Not human respiratory. No longer wind. A motion, a shift, a displacement of area. Then a 2D whisper nearer. She clenched her jaw, refusing to show. As a substitute, she targeted on room 17. The air inside the room shimmered, like heat rising off barren region asphalt. Inside that shimmer, shadows folded in patterns that reminded her of the spiral carved into the tile, curving, looping, completing cycles lengthy before she understood them. The reflection lifted its hand, slow, graceful, pointing into the room. But its eyes by no means left the invisible presence in the back of. Step inside, her mirrored image urged. Now, her muscle mass tightened. A primal fear pressed at her backbone, telling her to run, to leap into her car and peel away till desert and inn shrank into fable again. However, interest, obligation, responsibility have been stronger. She advanced, and the moment her foot crossed the brink of room 17, the entire inn groaned, a deep, resonant vibration, rolling via beams and walls, just like the settling of historical stone. The door slammed behind her. The room plunged right into a dim, amber glow, as although lit by using an unseen lantern. The mirrors hummed in unison, low, vibrating, intertwining, till the air itself felt like a held chord. In the most important reflect, the smoky one above the cloth wardrobe, shapes fashioned slowly before everything. Then, with startling clarity, not reflections, figures, humans, a gathering of faces she'd visible inside the mirror visions. Lydia, the midwife, the service provider with the woven blankets, the youngsters strolling in stone circles, the council under cottonwoods. They all stood in a semicircle, watching outward as even though privy to her presence. One progressed, Elias, alive not as an echo, now not as a memory, however, as though he had been standing proper on the alternative side of a thin veil of glass. He said, his voice calm and steady, no longer distorted with the aid of static. You crossed the edge. Exact. She swallowed hard. What simply took place outside? What was in the back of me? Elias appeared past her, via the reflect, into a few location she could not see. His expression darkened, not in worry, however in instruction. The ones who destroy memory, he said quietly. The ones who erased the songs, the maps, the pacts. They've been circling again. They felt the spiral stir while you touched the tile. Her fingers tightened round it. And what do they need? To prevent what comes next. He lifted his hand, and the mirrors across the room brightened, every one revealing a unique scene, no longer of the beyond, now not exactly of the destiny, but something in between. Saw a cover unfold throughout a table, glowing faintly at its seams, a network of small motels across the plains, every with reflected rooms, kids tracing symbols in dirt that looked like the marks on her tile, men tearing down a safe residence a long time in the past, girls rebuilding some other in mystery, a riverbed dried and then refilled, a spiral turning. Elias stepped nearer until his face almost aligned with hers across the veil. You're the convergence, he stated, not because of future, because you selected to pay attention. The mirrors flickered once, twice, and the room trembled again. Now, he continued, you need to pick once more. The smoky reflect darkened, swirling like storm clouds, collecting in thick glass. When it cleared, saw no longer records, now not memory, but an area she had never seen. A wasteland ridge, a stone circle, a hidden front half of buried beneath sand, a door carved together with her spiral image, a place awaiting her. Elias' voice softened, but urgency underpinned every syllable. It's going to open best for the only who completes the spiral. You carry the important thing, and they are already transferring to close it. The room shuddered tougher. Thud like footsteps echoed from at the back of the walls. His pulse raised. What do I do? She requested. Elias' eyes locked onto hers. Take the tile. Leave now. Cross earlier than they attain the lodge. The land will lead you to the ridge. And the mirrors. They will preserve them back, Elias whispered, but no longer for all time. The door behind rattled violently. Her mirrored image, now perfectly synced with her, turned in the direction of the sound with a look of grim dedication. Elias lifted his palm to the glass. Cross before they destroy the delay. Some other thud nearer. The lighting fixtures flickered. His breath hitched. She tightened her grip at the clay tile, stepped back from the cloth cabinet, then sprinted closer to the door just as it burst inward. She didn't look again. However, the reflections did, and what they noticed wasn't human. The moment the door burst inward, a wind a ways too cold for Texas night spilled into room 17, carrying with it a sound like brittle pages snapping in a hearth. Didn't turn, her instincts screamed now not to. However, each mirror inside the room reacted for her, their surfaces rippling like disturbed water, reflections twisting to stand what she fled from. And the reflections noticed. What stepped through the doorway changed into now not a creature of flesh, nor shadow, nor any shape that obeyed earthly rules. It became a silhouette stitched from absence, its form described best by using the rims of light it wolfed. Where it passed, shade dimmed, wood grain dulled, dust iced over midair. Its outline flickered like a skipped frame in a broken film reel, always a fraction out of sync, as though it didn't fully exist in this moment, but become forcing itself into it, sprinted down the hallway toward the car parking zone, heart pounding so difficult it felt like it'd rupture. At the back of her, glass shattered, not from impact, however, as though the mirrors had been screaming. Their surfaces flared shiny in protest, defying the aspect's presence. The hotel itself groaned, timber straining like an antique ship in hard water. She didn't dare appearance returned, but in her peripheral, imaginative, and prescient, the hallway mirrors did, and their reflections showed glimpses of the entity, long limbs jerking 1 second too rapid or 1 second too slow, a face no longer fashioned for eyes, however, nevertheless, one way or the other looking, actions that didn't bend muscle groups but warped time. Her very own reflections sprinted in perfect sync together with her now, its eyes sharp, its functions resolute, a manual, now not a mimic. Run, her meditated self whispered, voice echoing a heartbeat earlier than her own breath. She burst through the motel's the front door into the blinding sweep of desert sunlight. Besides, the sun had already began dipping in the direction of the horizon, streaking the sky with orange and violet. Time had slipped, minutes had exceeded, or hours, or something else completely. The clay tile in her hand pulsed again, stronger, urgently heat. She darted closer to her car, fumbling with the keys, her arms shaking. At the back of her, the inn lighting flickered violently, white, yellow, white, the partitions groaning as though resisting the intruder's presence. A voice cried out. She whirled. June stood on the walkway, clutching the railing so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her face turned into pale, eyes wide, hair whipping within the unnatural wind spilling from room 17. They breached the mirrors. Go. June shouted. Get to the ridge. What ridge? Yelled, choking on growing dirt. June lifted her arm and pointed east towards a faint silhouette of mesas past the highway, glowing faintly where the remaining of the day touched their edges. The place the tile recalls. June cried. Another shattering crash boomed at the back of her. The issue from room 17 stepped into the sunlight, its form warping, bending the air like warmth haze. Besides, the wasteland wind dropped 10 levels round it. It hated light. It hated presence. It hated memory. Dove into her automobile, slammed the door, and twisted the important thing. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. The entity jerked toward her, quicker than something that size ought to pass. Its limbs bending like time-lapse branches caught in a hurricane. But the mirrors weren't finished shielding her. Every window of room 17 exploded outward, now not with violence, but with a surge of pure reflected light. An outstanding flare of fractured daylight shot across the automobile parking space, slamming into the creature like a wave. It staggered backward, its shape rippling, dissolving, pulling itself inward to keep away from the mild. June shouted over the roar, "Move now." The mirrors can most effective preserve it for seconds. Seconds. Time that changed into all this vicinity turned into made of. Slammed her foot at the fuel. The tires screeched, biting into gravel, and the auto shot ahead. The creature lunged as the mild weakened, stretching one elongated arm towards her, its attain bending shadows, its fingertips grazing the air simply in the back of her trunk. The tile in her hand burned so hot she almost dropped it. The desolate tracked road blurred beneath her wheels as she sped east, coronary heart hammering, breath tight, mind racing in fractured reminiscences. Elia's announcing, "They destroy reminiscence." June pronouncing, "It chooses its keepers." The mirrors transferring a second early. Her reflection announcing, "Begin." The map-like sample etched behind the tile. The ridge. She gripped the steerage wheel with one hand, the tile with the alternative. The pattern etched into its returned regarded to shift beneath the daylight. Its strains turning like constellations, rotating into roll. She risked one glance inside the replicate. The creature changed into already in the street, its limbs stretching, pulling itself forward in stuttering leaps, its shape phasing inside and out of the existing, as even though time itself refused to maintain it regular. Dust swirled behind's automobile in a wild plume. She pressed the accelerator further. the mesas beforehand sharpened, rising like historical guardians from the plains. As she approached the ridge, the tile grew hotter, vibrating with cause, its spiral glowing brighter than the death solar. Then, abruptly, she saw it, half hidden at the bottom of the ridge. A stone circle, a pattern etched in rock, a faint doorway formed to fine inside the wilderness wall. The markings matched the tile. Her headlights, even within the dimming mild, caught symbols carved deep into the stone spirals, traces, woven styles like the ones she'd visible within the mirrors. The land itself remembered. She skidded to a prevent. The creature's distorted silhouette darkened the road at the back of her, clutched the tile, stepped out of the car, coronary heart pounding, and the instant her foot touched the floor inside the stone circle, the entire ridge trembled in reaction. The rock wall before her break up open, now not violently, however gracefully, like an eyelid lifting. A warm, pulsing light glowed within. Behind her, the creature shrieked, its sound now not of lungs or throat, however of time tearing, stepped toward the outlet. The tile in her hand grew to become white warm. The creature lunged, and the entrance inhaled her into its mild. The wilderness snapped, returned to silence. The sector dissolved into mild, not blinding, no longer harsh, but warm and dense, like sinking slowly into illuminated water. Felt her body lifted, suspended in a weightless hush in which sound ceased to exist, or even her heartbeat diminished into the glow. Then slowly, lightly, the light thinned, settling into shapes, partitions, air. Her touched floor. She stood in a cavernous chamber, carved entirely from faded stone, clean as river-worn bone. The ceiling arched excessive above her like the underside of a canyon sky, etched with spirals, traces, intersecting styles, exactly like the tile she nonetheless clutched. Here the carvings pulsed faintly, as if alive. The chamber became quiet, too quiet. No wind, no echoes, no shadows except her own. The creature outside screamed once more, its voice muffled with the aid of thick stone, nonetheless searching, nevertheless accomplishing. But it couldn't comply with her here. She knew that instinctively. This region was not a refuge, it became a boundary, constructed to keep something in, or out, or each. And she or he changed into now not by myself. A figure shimmered into being across the chamber, rippling into shape, as if drawn by unseen hands. Gasped, Elias stood on the ways aspect of the room, but not as he had regarded in the mirrors. He regarded more youthful here, 40, perhaps 50, with eyes vivid as wasteland dawn, and posture consistent as carved earth. He stated, his voice echoing softly, Welcome to the convergence chamber. She approached him slowly, uncertain whether he was really Gift or some other mirrored echo. However, whilst she stopped an arm's period away, the warmth radiating from him became unmistakably alive. "You didn't die," she whispered. "Not." Elias smiled, however, with the unhappiness formed by many years. "My body did. My reminiscence didn't. No longer all souls leave in one piece. Some stay in which they're wished." I looked around the chamber, the pulsing partitions, the spiraling stiles, the faint glow in the back of the carvings. "What's this area?" Elias stepped beside her and gestured to the floor, observed his gaze. Without delay underneath them, carved into the stone with not possible precision, changed into a large spiral, same to the tile's image, however wider than a house. Its earrings extending throughout the chamber like a terrific pulse frozen in time. "It's in which all of the memories meet," Elias said. "The location the elders constructed earlier than history forgot them. A sanctuary, a vault, a crossroads. A crossroads of what?" "Time," Elias whispered. His breath stalled. The mirrors of room 17 weren't just reflections. They have been tethered to this chamber. The entirety they show, the entirety they maintain. It all leads right here. Knelt, strolling her arms over the spiral grooves. The stone changed into heat, humming faintly, as if electricity threaded through it like breath through veins. Elias crouched beside her. "You activated the chamber the instant you stepped internal with the tile. That's why they chased you. They've been watching for the one who could hold the spiral." "Who are they?" she requested, shivering on the memory of the creature's distorted shape. Elias stated, "No longer creatures, now not spirits, ruptures. Fractures in memory made appear. Every time records is erased. Whenever a subculture is silenced, whenever a fact is buried, something breaks. Those breaks gather, develop, feed, until they grow to be matters." I felt unwell, and the hotel, a barrier, a memory stronghold. Room 17 became placed there because mirrors anchor time. They reflect what become, what is, and from time to time, whilst the proper keeper arrives, what have to be. I stared at him. "Why me?" "Due to the fact you concentrate," Elias stated softly. "The general public are seeking for answers. You sought knowledge. You treated every echo like a voice, not a clue." Before aught to reply, the chamber trembled violently. Dirt shook from the ceiling. The carvings flared shiny enough to harm. Elias' face tightened. "They're attempting to interrupt through the ridge. The chamber is calling for restoration. You have to entire the spiral." "How?" He pointed in the direction of the middle of the large spiral. A round stone platform rose slowly from the floor, glowing with a gentle blue-white radiance. On it lay a bronze bowl, a woven cloth patterned like a map, a small carved determin made from clay, a shard of replicate artifacts from each generation she had seen. The selected keeper ought to area the tile within the middle, Elias stated, and align the past artifacts in the right order. The spiral will reconnect, sealing the breaks, restoring the flow of reminiscence, and they will lose their foothold. What takes place if I fail? I asked. Elias met her gaze without blinking. The hotel falls, the mirrors die, and reminiscence collapses into oblivion. A deep crack split the away's wall. Stone dirt rained down like powdered moonlight. No greater time sprinted onto the platform. The tile burned in her hand, vibrating with close to painful urgency. She located it into the crucial indentation. It matched perfectly, and the spiral on its surface lit up, rings glowing vivid gold. The bowl, the material, the figurine, the replicate shard, all pulsed in response, waiting for alignment. Elias stood back, giving her space. Trust what the mirrors taught you. The chamber shook once more, and from past the ridge, the creature screamed louder, closer, hungrier, closed her eyes, respiratory hard, and reached for the primary artifact. Her hands brushed the reflect shard. The spiral brightened. The chamber hummed. Outside, stone cracked, and the burst via, not into the chamber, however, into the entrance. A swirling mass of damaged seconds, mismatched shadows, and devoured mild. Its arrival shook the chamber to its center, opened her eyes. The creature lunged, and he or she slammed the mirror shard into its vicinity on the spiral. The world exploded with sound. The instant the reflect shard locked into the spiral's groove, the convergence chamber erupted in a shockwave so forceful it felt like the earth itself took a breath and launched it. The sound wasn't thunder. It wasn't stone breaking. It was a refrain, thousands of voices layered collectively across centuries, whispering, chanting, humming in a tongue crafted from all the forgotten languages had glimpsed within the mirrors. The iced-up mid-lunge no longer stopped. Stuck, its shape split like mild through a prism. One fragment jerking ahead a 2D early, any other a 2D overdue, any other stuttering in a moment that didn't belong to the existing at all. It twisted, attempting to drag itself unfastened. However, the shard of replicate glowed white-blue, radiating outward across the spiral. Elias shouted above the swelling hum, "Pick the following artifact." She spun toward the platform. 3 objects remained. The woven fabric, the clay figurine, the bronze bowl, the spiral earrings glowed brighter, urging her ahead. She grabbed the woven fabric, a map made of memory. The instant it touched her hands, it rippled like water, rearranging its stitches into the equal route she had seen in the mirrors. The hidden network of secure homes, the lullaby paths, the symbols exceeded through generations. Elia's voice rose above the trembling chamber, vicinity it to the east, wherein the threads converge. Dropped to her knees, pressed the fabric onto the Japanese groove, and the spiral flared once more. A brand new shockwave rippled outward. The screamed, its voice shuddering like 1,000 broken clocks, putting nighttime out of sync. Cracks unfold through its shape, fractures of absence splitting into smaller ruptures, drifting like black dirt across the chamber. The chamber shook tougher. A fissure opened inside the ceiling, mild, spilling down in golden streams. Faster, Elias referred to as out, shielding his eyes. She reached for the clay figurine, a tiny human form holding a small seed. It vibrated in her fingers, warm and alive, as though the fingers that carved it nonetheless touched it. Pictures flashed Via's thoughts, Lydia coaching songs underneath moonlight, a mother handing her infant a quilt with hidden roots, vacationers sharing bread with strangers, a midwife burying equipment for folks that could come after, generations passing understanding in whispers, so smooth records never heard them. The figurine pulsed again, mild, pressing. South, Elias shouted. Location at south, the basis, the beginning. Positioned the figurine where the spiral's southern curve widened. The floor rumbled like a living heart underneath her fingers. The spiral radiated outward, golden strains stretching throughout the complete chamber, attaining the carvings at the partitions. The shattered extra, its shape splitting into dozens of stuttering silhouettes, every dissolving faster than the final, its limbs bent inward, collapsing in on themselves like burnt paper folding into ash. Only one artifact remained, the bronze bowl, heavy, historic, its floor engraved with symbols that gave the look of ripples of water, like concentric circles of time. As lifted it, the chamber's light dimmed, waiting, maintaining breath. North, Elias whispered now not shouting, his voice reverent. It belongs on the north. The vessel, the keeper, the surged in one very last desperate movement, dragging itself forward, its fractured shape collapsing and reforming, collapsing once more, flickering in broken time, sprinted to the northern groove simply as the creature lunged. She thrust the bowl into area. The spiral finished. Silence. Then A deafening burst of mild exploded upward like a geyser. The chamber filled with a vortex of golden radiance, spirals spinning into the air, wrapping across the creature screamed, now not in rage or hunger, however in defeat, as the spirals overwhelmed inward, binding it in loops of reminiscence, of each moment stolen, every voice silenced, each reality buried. The spirals tightened, and they imploded into a single pinpoint of black mild that winked out like a loss of life megastar. The chamber went still. The carvings glowed with a steady, peaceful rhythm. The trembling stopped, collapsed onto her hands, respiratory tough, tears streaking her face. Without her understanding, they'd fallen. Elias approached quietly and knelt beside her. "It's accomplished," he said softly. "You restored the spiral. You closed the breaks." I peered up at him, chest heaving. "Is it over?" "For now." The answer chilled her. Elias persisted lightly. "Come from wounds. You healed many today. But so long as history is erased, or forgotten, or twisted, greater wounds will shape." She closed her eyes. "I don't know if I can face greater of those matters." Elias touched the vital spiral, which hummed softly below his hand. "You need to, not on my own. The land has selected many keepers. You're simply the primary to evoke the chamber in a century." The chamber lighting fixtures dimmed, settling into a smooth, dwelling glow. The spiral at the tile, in its pocket, pulsed in sync with the stone below her. Elias extended a hand to help her stand. "There's one extra factor you need to peer." He guided her towards a smaller archway in the back of the chamber, one she had no longer observed within the chaos. Carved above it, turned into the equal symbol from the tile's underside. A door to something deeper, something older, something ready. Elias stepped apart, allowing her to method on my own. Hesitated, her heartbeat slowing lower back into human rhythm. She placed her hand at the carved stone, and the archway opened like a curtain of light. Beyond it was darkness, alive, respiration ready. Took a step interior. The door sealed behind her, and the whole thing went quiet. The darkness became not empty. It greeted like a living presence, quiet, watchful, conscious. The air within the deeper chamber felt heavier, thicker, as although time itself pooled here in layers. Her footsteps echoed softly, every sound swallowed a second too late, as if the chamber had been listening before allowing the noise to exist. A faint golden line regarded in advance, then any other, and every other. They spiraled throughout the ground, tricky, delicate, glowing faintly inside the dark, mane her deeper into the cavern. Followed, her hand brushing the wall for stability. The stone turned into warm, pulsing like a sluggish heartbeat. She reached a wide, round space. At its center stood something impossible, a pillar of glass, but no longer a mirrored image, no longer a mirror, a timeline suspended inside the obvious pillar were fragments of scenes, arms stitching coated quilts, an infant hiding a seed pouch in dry earth, a council of elders carving symbols beneath moonlight, a map drawn in ash on a fire-warmed stone, a hotel being constructed brick via brick, June's grandmother setting mirrors, whispering blessings, her grandfather tracing the spiral in his notes, opening the resort room door. The pillar showed the whole lot that had ever been included, and the whole lot that had ever been threatened. As she stepped closer, the scenes shifted automatically, as even though responding to her presence. New images fashioned, fires destroying archives, officials burning papers, complete languages erased from ledgers, kids afraid to talk their grandparents' names, songs no longer sung, painfully familiar wounds. His breath trembled. That is what creates the isn't it? A voice spoke back from behind her. Part of it spun. Elias stood inside the archway, but he became not alone. June stepped from the shadows beside him. Her mild expression turned into long past, changed with the aid of something greater historic, extra resolute, as although she had dropped the masks worn for guests and found out the keeper underneath. You have to understand the entire fact, June stated softly. Elias nodded. Reminiscence isn't always only about preservation. It's additionally about result. June gestured to the glass pillar. Do you see the missing scenes? Appeared again, after which she noticed them. Gaps, clean areas, moments swallowed completely through darkness, as even though a person had carved holes into time. What are the ones? She whispered, Elias' voice reduced. Moments so thoroughly erased that they no longer exist in any human memory. Not recorded, now not whispered, no longer surpassed down. Nothing stays, not even grief. June stepped towards the pillar, placing her palm lightly on its floor. These wounds develop into. They feed on forgotten truths. Stared on the blank spaces, feeling a chilly ache deep in her chest. Can they be restored? To a degree, Elias said. However, recovery requires extra than understanding. June endured. It calls for reciting reminiscence, selecting to recollect, deciding on to hold what changed into misplaced, even though we don't realize every detail. Looked at them each. Why show me this now? Elias exchanged a heavy glance with June. Because you closed the primary spiral, he stated. June lifted her chin. Because of this, the chamber recognizes you as a keeper. stepped lower back, her breath catching. Keeper, I'm just a historian. Precisely, June stated gently. A historian who listens. Elias approached the pillar, tapping it lightly. A deep hum resonated through the chamber. He said evenly, "The spiral you restored nowadays become best one in every of 7. The chamber pulsed as soon as quiet, echoing ominous. June's voice softened. Although her phrases have been however mild, there are 6 greater convergence chambers hidden throughout the land. Every protects an extraordinary lineage of memory, every guarded by means of its own lodge, its personal mirrors, its personal keepers." Felt her heartbeat quicken. The motel network inside the material. It wasn't just a gadget of safe haven. It changed into a map Elias completed, a map of the closing spirals. June advanced, supplying her hand. In each generation, a person has been chosen to restore one spiral. However, the others were dormant, a ways too long. There have begun to stir. Elias' voice deepened. The creatures you saw these days were weak fragments. Those at the dormant spirals will be older, stronger, hungrier. Felt her throat tighten. Why me? Why now? June smiled, now not kindly, no longer sweetly. However, with the fierce, warm temperature of a person who sees reality honestly. Because you didn't run. You requested questions. You listened to echoes. You honored the dead and the dwelling. You treated memory with appreciate. The pillar pulsed, and the blank gaps commenced to glow faintly, as although sensing her presence. Elias stepped nearer. You restored one spiral. You may repair the others. Shook her head, beaten. I don't even understand where to begin. June pointed to the tile, nonetheless sparkling, in its pocket. You begin, she said softly, the identical manner all keepers do. With step 1, the chamber darkened, the pillar brightened, and a single glowing line prolonged from the spiral beneath his feet. A brand new path, a new direction, a new destination, a resort she had in no way seen, a spiral she had never touched, awaiting, swallowed tough, and stepped closer to the course. The glowing direction extended outward from the spiral underneath, his feet like a ribbon of receding gold, winding through the darkness till it sharpened into a clean path northwest, closer to distances she'd never crossed, wearing the weight of stories she'd by no means yet heard. The air within the chamber thickened, buzzing with the low, regular resonance of something awakening after centuries of silence. Elias stepped beside her, his expression solemn. June remained at his shoulder, looking with the stillness of a person who had organized her entire existence for this second. The course live open lengthy, Elias stated. After you step onto it, the chamber will seal itself again. You'll most effective be able to return after the second one spiral is restored. Swallowed, her heart pounding against her ribs. And the second one spiral, in which is it? June waved her hand gently over the glowing line. The air shifted. The gold brightened, increasing right into a small floating picture. A lodge sign flickered into view. Dim, weathered, 1-2, its bulbs dead. Desolate tract, Lantern Motor Resort. Toll Road 47, New Mexico. A shudder ran through. The signal looked love. It hadn't been touched in many years. June spoke softly. That lodge turned into once a sanctuary, like Meridian Resort. Its mirrors were powerful. Older, they showed visions, now not best of what occurred. However, what ought to appear, branches of possibility. Elias completed the thought. However, its keeper disappeared, and with no person tending the mirrors, the spiral weakened. The signal flickered once more, and saw something in the back of it, no, internal it. A tall, discerned status immobile in one of the lodge's windows. A silhouette, watching, her belly tightened. Is that a... June shook her head slowly, grimly. No, that's worse. That's a keeper's echo. His chest tightened. An echo. Elias nodded. When a spiral collapses without closure, the keeper's memory is fractured. Their presence lingers, not alive, not dead, repeating the closing second they attempted to guard the spiral. And if I am going there, requested quietly. June's eyes softened with both worry and wish. You'll be capable of free the echo, in case you hold the spiral. But the guarding it'll be older than the one you fought. Tons older. The glowing root pulsed beneath's feet. It didn't push her. It waited, as though giving her one ultimate threat to show returned. Inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Before I am going, tell me something. Anything, June stated. Looked into the pillar of suspended scenes. Why were the spirals created in secret? Why didn't the sector understand memory needed to be protected like this? Elias smiled regrettably. Due to the fact the world believes history is secure in books. June located a mild hand on's shoulder. But books burn, languages fade, humans in energy erase what doesn't serve them. The spirals defend the reminiscences too fragile for the sector to carry overtly. Nodded slowly. It didn't make the concern vanish. However, it made its purpose clean. She stepped onto the glowing path. The chamber shivered. The golden line stretched ahead, lifting her toes barely above the stone floor, pulling her into motion, lightly but insistently, like a modern day sporting her downstream. The darkness parted around her, unraveling into lengthy, shimmering threads. Elia's voice echoed at the back of her. Remember what the mirrors taught you. They don't simply reflect, they display. June's voice observed. And concentrate for echoes. Their trapped stories calling out. The sparkling tunnel stretched ahead, its walls alive with drifting scenes, recollections she had not lived, voices she did now not know, fragments of lullabies, palms weaving material with the aid of firelight, a person burying a key within the desolate tracked soil. The course carried her quicker. The air thickened. The glow pulsed. Her heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of the spirals. Then, without caution, the tunnel of mild tore open and stumbled out onto sun-bleached gravel. Wind roared beyond her ears. Dry sagebrush rattled in opposition to an antique fence. A dwindled neon sign buzzed overhead. Desert Lantern Motor Hotel. The same sign she had seen within the chamber. The parking zone was empty. The home windows of the rooms were darkish. The sector felt paused, took one cautious breakthrough. The lodge door creaked open on its personal. A warm wind drifted out. Then, a determined moved interior, one of the rooms. Slowly, easily, repetitively, an echo caught in a moment. It could not break out. Spores and skin prickled. The air shifted. The shadows lengthened, and at the some distance, give up of the parking zone beneath a flickering. Something stirred, a ripple in area, a distortion, a shadow folding over itself. Something historical, something hungry, something that had in no way been visible inside the mirrors. Because it did now not belong to memory. It belonged to forgotten futures. The of the second spiral. His pulse raised. The inn lighting fixtures flickered, and the creature commenced to turn towards her. The shadow under the flickering shifted with an intelligence that didn't belong to something dwelling. It opened up slowly, too slowly, like a long-forgotten memory, waking up with stiff limbs and no sense of kindness. Felt the air compress, the way the environment tightens earlier than a hurricane breaks throughout a desolate tract valley. The creature noticed her. It didn't appear like the first. It didn't flicker between seconds. It didn't stutter in and out of existence. This one held stillness, horrible, suffocating stillness, as though it occupied every second right away. Its define was humanoid, but impossibly tall, its limbs corded with shadow and mild, its face a smear of broken reflections, like a reflect shattered inward, now not outward, where eyes have to had been. Faint spirals pulsed, turning slowly, painfully, as although grinding reality itself. While it advanced, the gravel didn't shift beneath its toes. Time shifted. The inn lights flickered out. The wind froze midair. The signal buzzed, then fell silent. The creature moved, and she stumbled backward, forcing breath into her lungs. Her hand shot to her pocket, instinctively, and the tile warmed, lightly pulsing like a warning. A voice drifted throughout the parking lot. Don't examine it immediately. She spun toward the sound. At the open doorway of room 3 stood a man, late 40s, worn-out eyes, arms shaking, but unmistakably acquainted. The keeper's echo, the person who once tended this resort, trapped in the closing moment earlier than his spiral collapsed. He regarded translucent, like a mirrored image caught in fog. His movements jittered, repeating small loops, as although he had been being dragged backward by means of something unseen. However his voice gods, his voice was human, warned, pleading. You've got to break its maintain, he rasped, before it breaks you. That took every other step. Reality bent inward, felt her heartbeat stumble. What does it want? She whispered. The echo's voice wavered. It needs the same element all need: obliteration. Of memory, of lineage, of everything's spiral's shield. The creature tilted its shattered mirror head, sensing her. Spiral eyes pulsed. Seconds buckled, felt her knees weaken. The echo stepped forward, although every motion price him, every motion glitching like tape worn skinny. The spiral here, it in no way completed. I failed. I attempted to anchor it with the mirrors. However, the fractures were too deep. They swallowed the chamber. Kept her eyes low, looking at the gravel. How do I hold it now? The echo raised his trembling hand. In it was something small, metal, and damaged. A key. A hotel key, room 9. Bloodless silver, bent on the teeth. One too rusted. He held it out toward her, and his voice dropped to a whisper, trembling on the edge of vanishing. This unlocks the replicate chamber of this resort. The second one spiral is living there. However, it's extra volatile than the primary. It collapsed with me in it. Approached carefully, privy to the drifting behind her, like a shadow peeling itself off the horizon. Take it, the echo whispered urgently, before it sees. She reached out. Her fingers brushed his. Cold kissed her pores and skin, and the echo screamed. Not in ache, in caution. Run. The lunged, now not closer to her, in the direction of the echo, its arms stretched across time, passing through many years in an unmarried movement. The keeper's echo flickered violently, his form tearing among moments like cloth ripping in wind. His instincts kicked in. She snatched the important thing from his dissolving hand and bolted toward the hotel row. Heart pounding so hard she felt it in her ribs. The shrieked, a legitimate, like all of the erased histories of the world crying out. The ground cracked, the air thinned, fact folded in a wave. The echo's shape buckled, sinking to his knees as his define frayed like smoke. Room 9, he shouted with what energy he had left. The mirrors will align whilst you. His voice cut, the spiral eyes flared, and the echo scattered into fragments of reminiscence, dissolving into the motel shadows. No, cried out. The shifted its interest to her now. It had consumed the echo, and with him, the ultimate remnant of the previous keeper, fled down the lodge walkway. He clutched so tight her palm bled. The creature moved without shifting, blurring throughout area, bending distances with its gaze. Time warped. Her footsteps echoed out of sync. Home windows flickered with scenes that weren't hers. Mirrors at the back of curtains rippled with broken futures. Doors shuddered as though something inner begged to be let out. Room 9 sat on the some distance stop of the row. Its door was barely ajar. A faint blue glow spilled out, the equal glow she'd visible below the ridge. The glow of a spiral, getting ready to awakening. The screeched behind her, its presence tearing through what remained of the hotel's reminiscence, like a wildfire through brittle grass, made the final soar toward the door, shoved it open, and slammed it shut behind her. The room locked itself. Every reflect at the partitions ignited into first-rate blue mild, and inside the center of the room, hovering above the floor, turned into the second spiral. Incomplete, lacking portions, interrupted with the aid of cracks, but alive, ready, turned simply because the door behind her bulged inward, the pounding in opposition to it, fracturing the wood, splintering the lock. She held the key, trembling in her hand. A symbol etched into its surface commenced to glow. A spiral. The door cracked. The mirrors shook. The spiral pulsed, and the room whispered. End what he could not. The room shook so violently that felt the floor itself bending, as even though time had softened under her feet. The second spiral hovered on the middle of room 9, sparkling an unsteady blue, each broken ring trembling from the force of the pounding on the door. Timber splintered, screws snapped, the creature's fingers, in the event that they have been palms at all, pressed via the cracks. Its hands made now not of bone, but of warped seconds, twisting like blades, stumbled toward the spiral. The mirrors lining the room flashed in a frenzy, one displaying her grandfather writing, every other showing June's grandmother putting the mirrors, some other displaying the antique keeper failing as the gobbled the chamber many years in advance. Their reflections all became towards, pleading, urging, end it, The lodge key burned in her palm. Its spiral-fashioned crest glowed shiny white. She took a breath and lifted it toward the soaring spiral. The instant the important thing touched the first damaged ring, the whole room gasped, air pulling inward, as although the spiral itself inhaled for the first time in lifetimes. Light surged, the cracked ring sealed, the spiral brightened, the mirrors steadied, the shrieked, slamming fully in opposition to the door. Its face pressing through the timber, spiral eyes spinning so speedy they reduce through reality itself. Its voice tore through the room like a hurricane of erased memories, cried out and jammed the key into the second smash. A stunning flash erupted. The spiral's rings tightened into best alignment. The door in the back of her exploded inward. The surged via, but the spiral activated. A column of pure, resonant memory shot upward, engulfing the creature. The mirrors blazed, reflecting each forgotten truth. Every silenced voice, every erased records the creature had consumed. The room roared with the strength of unbroken time. The screamed, fissures ripping throughout its shape, shadows peeling away like ash. Its spiral eyes shattered, its limbs folded, and as it lurched in the direction of with one very last, determined reach, the finished spiral unleashed a radiant pulse that struck the creature within the middle of its hollow chest. The imploded, no longer with violence, however with silence, dusting into debris of forgotten moments that drifted upward and dissolved into the spiral's light. Then it was long past, absolutely long gone. The spiral dimmed, settling right into a mild glow, entire again, steady breathing like a newly mended coronary heart. The mirrors cooled, the room exhaled, collapsed to her knees, tears spilling freely, her whole body trembling with exhaustion and awe. And in the doorway, in which the had stood moments earlier than, a gentle shimmer seemed, the keeper's echo, but no longer fractured, no longer glitching, no longer trapped. His form turned into whole, eyes clean, shoulders eased, as though an excellent weight had in the end fallen away. He knelt beside her, gratitude warming his faded functions. "You freed me," he whispered, voice shaking with both comfort and peace. "You restored what I couldn't." I regarded up via blurred vision. The spiral, its entire. "It's miles now," he stated gently, "due to the fact you listened, because you remembered, and because you stood wherein others fell." He positioned a heat hand on her shoulder, actual, solid for one very last heartbeat. "Thank you, Keeper," he whispered. Then he smiled and dissolved into mild. The room softened into stillness. Out of doors, the neon signal flickered lower back to life. The wind began to transport once more. The celebrities resumed their gradual glide throughout the sky. The barren region Lantern Motor Hotel breathed, alive over again, stood, wiped her tears, and stepped out into the night time. The hotel lighting fixtures glowed a bit brighter, as even though bowing to her passage, the tile in her pocket pulsed softly, not with urgency now, however with quiet, steady reason. She gazed towards the distant horizon. 6 spirals remained. However, for now, for one ideal, silent second, the world was complete, and let herself breathe. The end, for an extended whilst, stood beneath the open sky, letting the cool desert wind wash across her face. The inn around her, as soon as solar bleached, damaged, haunted by means of fractured echoes, now breathed with a sort of fragile peace. The neon signal above the office flickered softly, now not desperate, not caution, but pulsing like a heartbeat, subsequently finding its rhythm. The universe felt, nevertheless, but now not silent. The tile in her pocket hummed faintly, now not with urgency anymore, but with quiet root, like a compass remembering wherein it once pointed. She pulled it out and held it closer to the horizon. The image etched into its clay floor glowed, brightening step by step, till a faint beam of light aligned with the nighttime sky, pointing west, in the direction of anything spiral weighted subsequent. Exhaled slowly. There's usually some other. However, this time, she didn't sense fear. She felt prepared. The resort workplace door creaked open in the back of her. She grew to become startled, expecting any other echo, any other reminiscence, another shadow shaped with the aid of broken time. Instead, a young girl stepped out, darkish hair tied lower back, tired eyes, fingers trembling barely as though waking from an extended dream. For a second, neither spoke. Then the woman whispered, I suppose I fell asleep in room 4. Blinked, whilst the girl frowned. I don't recognize. There was a storm, and the mirrors, they were unusual. I heard a man calling for assist. Then the entirety went darkish. I felt her chest tighten. The keeper's echo. The hotel hadn't just held him. It had held all of us gift, all through the fall apart. Frozen them, covered them in its very own atypical manner, whilst time buckled around the spiral. It's over now, stated softly. You're safe. The lady nodded slowly, as if feeling the fact of it ripple through the air. Then her gaze drifted in the direction of room 9, in which the entrance, nevertheless, glowed faintly blue at the rims. You probably did something, didn't you? Didn't answer. She didn't want to. The wind shifted gently, sporting with it the warm temperature of newly restored memory. The lady took a shaky breath. "Thank you." A quietness settled between them, deep, smooth, almost sacred. Then the female reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small object, a silver key. Room 12. Its enamel were intact, its spiral crest unbroken. "I don't understand why," the girl whispered. "However, while the mirrors went extraordinary, this key fell from the wall in my room. I saved it safe. I feel like it belongs to you." Normal it, feeling the metallic heat instantly in her palm. "Thanks." The woman nodded and returned closer to her room, dazed but complete, like a person waking from a dream lengthy enough to forget its edges. Grew to become returned toward the open wilderness. The tile in her other hand pulsed another time. "West." She slipped the brand new key into her pocket beside the tile. She tightened her jacket towards the deepening night. She walked toward her car, the gravel crunching underneath her boots in a rhythm that felt like reminiscence settling into vicinity. While she reached the motive force's door, she paused and appeared again, one final time, on the Wasteland Lantern Motor Inn. The neon sign flickered as soon as twice, then glowed step by step, as though nodding to her. "Thank you," she whispered again. Then she opened the door, slid into the driver's seat, and grew to become the engine. The headlights carved twin paths through the night as she pulled onto the empty highway. Someplace a long way ahead, 6 spirals waited. Someplace within the dark, other hotels held their breath. Someplace within the cracks of forgotten places stirred, however drove forward with steady clear up, the tiles sparkling in her pocket like a tiny sun, mane her deeper into the unknown, towards the following reality, closer to the subsequent spiral, toward whatever tale the mirrors were prepared to expose. And the wasteland wind whispered beneath the celebrities, not a caution now, but a welcome. The journey become now, not over. It had simplest just started. Drove west through the quiet wasteland night, the street stretching beforehand in a long silver ribbon under the moon. The hum of the engine becomes steady, comforting, almost like the inn's mirrors singing softly in the back of her. The tile in her pocket glowed with a sluggish heartbeat, guiding her deeper into the unknown. Hours handed, or possibly mins. Time felt gentle, malleable, nonetheless convalescing from the tear the second one had left in the back of. The wasteland around her shifted, gently rolling hills rising and falling like napping giants under starlight. Then the tile warmed sharply. A caution or a signal. She slowed the auto and pulled to the facet of the street. The wind brushed past her window like a whisper. Ahead, just slightly visible, a slender dirt trail reduce off from the dual carriageway, leading into a stretch of land so dark it appeared to swallow the moonlight. The tile pulsed as soon as a root, a command, grew to become onto the dust direction. The street grew rougher, stones kicking beneath her tires, sagebrush scraping along the edges of the car. After a few extra mins, the barren region opened into an extensive basin, flat, quiet, historical. In the center stood a solitary shape, not a resort, no longer a house, something older, a ranger station, abandoned, home windows boarded, roof patched with rusted steel sheets. Its timber sign, half of fallen, swung gently inside the breeze. Silver sky commentary put up Est. 1954. Stepped out, gravel crunching softly under her boots. The night smelled of dust and old pine. An unnatural quiet wrapped the basin, as though the air itself held its breath. The tile in her palm glowed brighter than before. This was the place. However, this wasn't a resort. Where have been the mirrors? Where turned into the spiral? She approached the station, her breath visible inside the unexpected bloodless. On the door, she hesitated, listening. No wind, no bugs, no sound at all. Then, knock from internal, a unmarried hollow faucet, iced up. Knock, knock. 2 taps this time. Now not frantic, now not threatening, rhythmic. She pushed the door open. The indoors turned into dirt covered, full of old ranger maps, metal submitting shelves overturned, papers strewn like forgotten reminiscences. A lantern hung from a rafter, swaying even though no wind touched it. Then she saw them. Mirrors, not hung neatly as inside the inns. These had been stored, piled towards the walls, leaned in clusters, protected with cracked cloths and dirt. Some had been round, some rectangular, some tall. A few shattered along the edges. None had been lively. All were dormant. The tile pulsed tougher. The mirrors were waiting. She stepped deeper interior. Then a voice drifted down from the loft above tender, trembling, complete of worry that had lived a ways too lengthy. You shouldn't be right here yet. His heart leapt. She grew to become upward. A person stood on the loft platform, illuminated only by moonlight filtering through gaps in the boards. His clothes had been dusty, torn in locations. His face faded, sleepless, however alive. No longer an echo, now not a reflection, now not a reminiscence, a living keeper. I was the final, he whispered. I the spirals were gone. I stepped nearer. I restored the second one. The lodge in New Mexico. The mirrors advised me to return here next. He flinched, looking suddenly afraid. You then don't recognize. You don't. The station shook. As soon as Tuffy, dust rained from the rafters. The mirrors along the wall vibrated, humming in low, nervous tones. The keeper's eyes widened. It found you. His blood ran cold. What found me? He lifted a trembling hand and pointed towards the deepest shadow at the away's stop of the station. A shadow that did no longer belong. A shadow that moved against the path of the lantern's swing. A shadow with weight, presence, motive. The man's voice cracked. The 1-3 stepped lower back as the shadow spread out, taller than the room itself, its shape a twisting mesh of half of visible futures collapsing in on themselves. The keeper grabbed the loft railing, leaning forward desperately. You combat it right here. This spiral isn't prepared. The mirrors haven't been wakened. But the shadow stepped closer, clutched the tile to her chest. Then how do I activate them? The keeper's breath got here fast and shallow. You need the third key. Where is it? His eyes met hers, full of sorrow. He appeared to carry like a curse. It's inside the shadow lunged, and the ranger station went darkish. The lights died, no flicker, no warning, just a suffocating drop into absolute black. His breath hitched in her throat. In the back of her, the 1-3 unfurled its mass like a collapsing galaxy. Its shape bending every ultimate thread of moonlight into itself. The darkness wasn't empty. No, it turned into full of motion, whispers, fractures of time, grinding in opposition to each different like broken glass. Somewhere above her, the reciting keeper gasped. Don't stand, nevertheless. It senses stillness. She bolted to the left, stumbling over splintered wood and fallen filing shelves. The creature reacted right away, its limbs stretching like shadows, pulled by means of unseen gravity, striking the spot in which she'd stood a heartbeat in advance. Time itself warped in its wake, the air slowing, thickening, twisting. She ducked in the back of a vintage metal desk, her coronary heart hammering in her ears. The keeper known as down again, voice shaking. Keep in mind what your spirals taught you. The first reminiscence, the second mirrored image, the 1-3. He stopped, a sharp inhale. The head turned toward him. No, please. Leapt from cover and hurled the nearest object, a cracked ceramic mug, on the creature. It shattered harmlessly against the shadowed shape. But the distraction changed into simply sufficient. The keeper stumbled backward, barely avoiding a limb that sliced through the loft floor where he'd been status. He shouted, the 033 spiral isn't approximately reminiscence or reflection. It's approximately continuity, a dwelling chain. You need the important thing to spark off the reflect circuit. You stated the keys within the... His voice cracked. Yes, due to the fact I dropped it when it got here for me. The creature roared, soundless, yet deafening, its void-like frame trembling with unnatural hunger. Braced herself in opposition to the station wall. The creature's edges wavered and flickered. Inside its darkish core, she noticed faint flashes, impressions, moments. A spinning resort key, a reflect shattering in slow motion, a toddler losing a compass, the keeper falling to the ground in terror. She squinted, more difficult. There, inside the creature's middle, something glimmered within the dark. Steel, silver, a spiral engraved on pinnacle. The 033 key took one shaky breakthrough. The keeper shouted in caution, "No, don't get close to its middle. The closer you get, the slower its slow moves. You'll freeze, similar to I nearly did." They became closer to her, sensing her goal. She had no weapon, no defend, simply the tile. She grasped it tight. Instantly, the clay tile glowed white-hot, brighter than it ever had. The shadows around her peeled away. Mirrors hanging on the partitions vibrated wildly. A few even lifting off the floor, turning closer to her like a discipline of awakening eyes. The tile pulsed. Warmth surged up her arm. The keeper whispered, breathless with terror, "What are you doing?" She didn't realize. She simplest felt. The mirrors spoke back to the tile's glow, their dormant surfaces rippling awake, smooth blue light shimmering throughout the room like moonlight on water. Their glow spilled over and for the primary time, the creature recoiled, slowly, painfully, as even though mild itself become poison. She took every other step, raising the tile higher. "Come on," she whispered. "Study me." The spiral eyes flared. Its frame twisted, and it lunged, flung herself sideways as the creature crashed into the wall, tearing via reality, splintering time itself. She rolled across the ground, coughing, her ribs aching. The tile skidded to the far facet of the room, simply under a cracked reflect. The mirror lit up absolutely, its glow merging with the tile. The jerked violently, attracted to the flare of light like a wounded animal, scrambled up, her vision swimming. "I want that key. I want that key." The keeper shouted hoarsely. "You attain it while the creature is whole. You should destroy its form first." How? He pointed towards the wall of mirrors. "Use them. That's why they're right here. Can't handle their own reflection." The creature staggered toward the sparkling mirror tile pair, lunged for the wall, grabbing mirrors, heavy, vintage, dusty. She lifted them, positioning them so they faced each different, and the creature. Light bounced between the mirrors, refracting, intensifying, echoing. A tunnel of reflection formed, growing brighter and brighter till the air hummed. The 033 paused, then shrieked, its voice splitting the wood, shattering a window, rattling the earth. Its shadowed body, spiraling inward like a collapsing famous person, shouted now. She sprinted, diving toward the center of the creature's collapsing form. Within the swirling black mass, the important thing spun in slow movement, caught among seconds. Her fingers brushed it. Time froze. Her coronary heart stopped. Her breath halted. Everything dimmed. She closed her fist across the key. A shockwave blasted outward. Mirrors shattered and reformed. Light roared and quieted. The scream cut off, and the creature exploded into dust. Silence. The dust drifted upward, disappearing like embers, collapsed onto the timber ground. Gasping, clutching the third spiral key against her chest. The ranger station, lighting fixtures, flickered lower back on. The mirrors dimmed into calm, regular glow. The keeper climbed down from the loft, his face faded with awe. You probably did it," he whispered. "You woke up the 033 spiral." The tile glowed faintly from throughout the room. 3 spirals down, 4 to head. Closed her eyes and whispered, "I'm not stopping now." Remained on the dusty station floor for numerous long seconds, her lungs burning, her palms wrapped so tightly around the 033 key that the steel dug into her palm. The air tasted metal like lightning. The silence left behind via the changed into deep, whole, nearly sacred. The living keeper descended the ultimate wood step, his boots creaking softly. He moved like a person, waking from a nightmare he wasn't positive had ended. He knelt beside her, eyes trembling with gratitude and disbelief. "You didn't just defeat it," he whispered. "You severed the oldest fracture, the one that's been growing due to the fact this location closed down." Compelled herself to face. Her legs shook, but she didn't care. She held the important thing up to the faint moonlight, filtering through a cracked window. The silver shimmered with a brand new glow blue at the edges, gold on the center, alive now that it become unfastened. "Whilst does the third spiral prompt?" she asked, voice uncooked. The keeper's gaze shifted towards the back of the station, where a trapdoor lay, half buried, below fallen boards and dirt. Its iron ring glinted, though no moonlight touched it. "You open the way," he stated softly. "I'll help manual you." Nodded, determined, exhausted, consistent. Collectively, they cleared antique bins, damaged lanterns, and dusty blankets from the trapdoor. After they lifted it, a chilly breath rose from underneath, historical air untouched for many years. A narrow staircase descended into darkness, deeper than the muse ought to allow. Held the tile in her palm. It glowed. The way ahead turned into clean. She commenced descending, every step echoing like a drop of water in a cavern. The keeper stayed close in the back of near sufficient to trap her if she slipped, a ways enough to appreciate the gravity of her undertaking. Underneath them, the chamber opened. It was smaller than the others she'd seen round, with stone partitions carved into spirals. However, the spirals here were damaged. Severed lines, interrupted sequences, symbols cut mid-curve. This chamber wasn't merely dormant. It changed into wounded. Stepped to its middle. The floor shimmered faintly, as if remembering a mild that had long considering that vanished. The mirrors above, the keeper said softly, have been a part of this chamber, but while they invaded, they closed down. You need to open the circuit once more. How? With the aid of restoring the spiral. She held up the key. The chamber responded immediately, thin streams of mild, awakening across the ground, like veins stirring with new blood. A pattern emerged. 3 grooves in the stone, 3 locations where keys belonged. Stepped to the first groove and placed the key from room 9, the second one spiral. It locked into vicinity with a hum. She stepped to the subsequent and inserted the 1-3 spiral key, the one she had ripped from this collapsing core. Blue light flowed outward, sealing the groove. Then got here the final groove, empty. Waiting. You want the first key, the keeper said. Nodded. She reached into her pocket. The tile pulsed. While she pulled it out, she realized. There, embedded in its back, hidden until the moment she needed it, become the lacking key. Small, clay, as historic as the spirals themselves. She positioned it lightly into the groove. The chamber inhaled. Mild erupted under her. The spirals on the walls reconnected, traces restoration. Curves mending. Symbols finishing themselves in a ripple of historic electricity. The whole chamber thrummed like a reciting heart. The mirrors above flickered, returned to life, their surfaces sparkling faintly through the cracks in the floorboards overhead. Then the chamber spoke, now not with words, no longer with sound, with reminiscence. She noticed visions, clean, vibrant, unbroken. A network accumulating underneath the silver sky. Rangers hiding sacred mirrors throughout a typhoon of violence. A keeper falling as they emerged. The mirrors dimming, failing, calling out for help. Calling for a destiny keeper. Calling for her. She gasped, clutching the wall, beaten by the pressure of the snapshots. The keeper steadied her. You're seeing what this spiral held. Continuity, unbroken historical past, uninterrupted line. The chamber's light softened to a mild pulse. It turned into carried out. The 1-3 spiral turned into restored. Opened her eyes. The keeper smiled for the first time, relieved, hopeful. You've finished what none of us may want to. You've restored the chain. Stepped lower back in the direction of the stairs. The chamber's heat glow embracing her like a promise. 3 spirals down, she whispered. 4 left. The tile warmed in her hand. After they emerged again into the ranger station, dawn changed into breaking over the desolate tract, washing the world in smooth gold and rose. The station not felt haunted. The mirrors no longer hummed in fear. The keeper walked her to the door. In which will you go subsequent? He requested. She gazed towards the horizon. Anywhere the tile leads. As though hearing her, the tile pulsed as soon as sharp and insistent, pointing her south. Her journey became some distance from over, but did now not hesitate. No longer anymore. She stepped into the morning mild, geared up for the 4th spiral. The morning solar stretched lengthy shadows across the wilderness ground as walked returned towards her car. The tile heat in her palm, guiding her south. The air became exclusive, now lighter, clearer, almost as though the healing of the 1-3 spiral had washed away a lingering heaviness she hadn't even found out she was carrying. The keeper stood at the entrance of the ranger station, looking her with the quiet reverence of someone witnessing a fantasy spread earlier than his eyes. Take care, he said softly. The 4th spiral. It's the only the others feared maximum. Paused. Why? He hesitated, swallowing hard, as it was never properly mapped. It's the spiral whose place was only by means of voices. Now not by way of mirrors. Now not via journals. Not by using runes. Handed down verbally, generation to era. However, that line broke a long time ago. Nodded. Then I'll rebuild that line too. The keeper managed a small, hopeful smile. I think you'll... climbed into her vehicle. As she started out the engine, the tile pulsed stronger once, twice, guiding her southward into lands she had in no way traveled. The wilderness gave way to crimson rock canyons, then to winding roads hidden among partitions of sandstone. Hours slipped away omitted. In the end, she reached a stretch of road so far flung, even the maps seemed to overlook it existed. The tile pulsed once more potent, pressing. Then it glowed with a color she hadn't yet seen, deep green, like historic forests and antique moss-blanketed stones. slowed the car, inexperienced. Up till now, the tile had glowed blue or gold, colorings tied to memory and continuity. Inexperienced became specific. Older, wilder, she pressed ahead, following the remoted course till the barren region shifted into a sudden landscape. A woodland, now not lush, now not thriving, but historical. Tall pines twisted into atypical shapes. Dry branches interlocked overhead like skeletal palms, creating a near-everlasting nightfall underneath the canopy. A skinny mist clung low to the ground, shimmering faintly around her ankles as she stepped out of the automobile. The tile pulsed once more, inexperienced and sturdy. "This is it," she whispered. The fourth spiral. The wooded area becomes silent. Too silent. No birds. No insects. No rustle of wind. However, something changed into watching her. She felt it right away. Eyes hidden in shadows. Breath held in the branches. A presence antique enough to recollect things human beings forgot centuries earlier than they found out to jot down. She stepped forward. The route narrowed, twisting deeper into the wooded area, as though leading her through an extended forgotten ritual. Vines curled around antique stone markers, symbols carved into them in spirals broken, weathered, incomplete. The path persevered till it reached a clearing, and there at its center stood a cabin, or what remained of one. Wooden walls collapsed inward, roof 1-2 long gone, home windows shattered, door missing absolutely. However, this wasn't just a ruined domestic. It turned into a keeper's station, older than the ranger submit, older than the motor inns, older even than the earliest facts her grandfather had studied. The power here become palpable, a pulse under the earth, like a heartbeat buried beneath centuries of soil and reminiscence. The tile glowed so brightly ought to slightly observe it. Inside the ruins, a circle of stone lay, buried underneath useless leaves. She knelt and brushed them aside, revealing the spiral carved into the earth, darkened by way of age, cut up via time, choked by using roots. This spiral wasn't wounded. It changed into suffocating. A damaged voice murmured, a broken lineage. At the back of her, a twig snapped. She iced over. Then she slowly turned her head. A figure stood at the edge of the bushes. Now not shadow, now not human. A young female with tangled black hair, barefoot, carrying a woven garment that looked as though it belonged to some other century. Her eyes glowed, faintly inexperienced, similar to the tile. She advanced, voice tender and melodic. "You got here." Stood slowly. "Hooray, you." The female smiled, an unhappy, historic smile. The remaining voice, of the fourth spiral, the final keeper of the lineage that died with me. His breath hitched. Died? The lady nodded gently. I'm an echo, but not just like the others. I am the echo of a tune, the final memory of the spiral that carried its truth via voices. The air vibrated faintly, as though listening. The echo stepped nearer. You need to wake up the spiral. However, now not with keys. No longer with mirrors. No longer with symbols. She placed a hand gently over his heart. With voice, swallowed. I don't understand the music. The echo smiled, unfortunately. No longer yet. However, the spiral recalls. The land recalls. And so will you. The ground trembled softly below them. The timber shuddered. The air dimmed. The wooded area exhaled. The echo whispered, I can teach you. And from deep inside the earth, something commenced to stir. The echo's voice drifted through the historical woodland, like a breeze stirring forgotten leaves. Closed her eyes and let the smooth, haunting melody upward push inside her. Each notice trembling with centuries of reminiscence, carried only in breath and heartbeat. The woodland replied right away. Branches straightening, mist glowing softly, the air turning warm as though life itself leaned towards concentrate. The spiral carved underneath the ruined cabin wakened. Traces of green mild traced via the earth, repairing their damaged curves, reconnecting their severed patterns. The ground pulsed like a living drum, every beat syncing with his voice. The more she sang, the brighter the spiral glowed. The bushes bowed, bending inward around the clearing in reverence. The echo stood earlier than glowing faintly. Her as soon as fractured form, stabilizing with every verse. You're remembering, she whispered. You're becoming the voice, the spiral misplaced. His throat tightened, but she kept making a song. Now not because she knew the phrases. However, due to the fact the earth itself guided them through her. A heritage she in no way knew she carried flowed via her breath. With a final trembling notice, the woodland burst into radiant, inexperienced mild. The spiral beneath her sealed completely. The fourth spiral turned into restored. The echo smiled, peaceful, vivid, finally loose. Her form shimmered, dissolving into thousands of tiny lights that rose into the canopy like fireflies. The lineage survives in you now, she whispered, and due to you, it will never be silenced once more. The lighting fixtures faded into the sky. The wooded area exhaled in relief. Stood by myself inside the clearing, her hands trembling, her eyes moist however consistent. The tile glowed one ultimate time, no longer with urgency, now not with caution, however, with warm temperature, gratitude, Slowly, lightly, the tile dimmed, for the primary time seeing that her adventure commenced. It rested, stepped lower back, in the direction of the edge of the woodland. Sunrise broke softly through the pines, turning the mist gold. She breathed in deeply, the fragrance of earth, pine, reminiscence, and peace. 4 spirals restored, 4 wounds healed, the echoes quieted, the long past. The sector felt whole. As she reached her car, she looked once more on the forest, now alive with quiet morning light rather than ancient dread. She touched the tile lightly, letting her fingertips relaxation on its now cool floor. "I did it," she whispered, voice cracking with alleviation. "It's over." The wind rustled through the bushes, soft, approving, as though the sector agreed, opened her automobile door, slid into the seat, and permit the silence embody her. Not the heavy silence of fear, but the mild kind that comes when memories are eventually whole. She began the engine. The road stretched before her, open, quiet, countless, not as a direction toward greater spirals or risks, however clearly as an avenue leading home, with the forest fading in her reflect and the sunrise growing at the back of her, whispered, "Thank you," and for the primary time, in a totally lengthy, even as she drove